Today I will be reviewing the new documentary produced by GojiMan on the subject of death and death anxiety. GojiMan is a popular vegan channel that is mostly about optimizing a healthy diet. He currently has 78,000 subscribers, and his most popular video has 374,000 views. He does response videos to other vegans, meat eaters, and ex-vegans, like the despicable vegetable police. He also sells poop tests. I used to talk about diet and exercise here, but eventually moved that to another channel. This video is different from his normal content and fell more in line with the subject of this channel, which is life itself. And you can't have life without death. But sadly, as happens with seemingly most vegans who stray from talking about animal rights or a healthy diet and attempt to get into real philosophy, he failed epically and produced the worst video of his career by far. The presentation and technical quality is to be commended, but the content itself is truly mind-numbingly unscientific and full of woo-woo mysticism. GojiMan, someone whom I thought valued scientifically backed evidence, has revealed himself to be a credulous god-botherer. It's very sad to see that happen, so he follows another vegan diet and fitness YouTuber, Corey McCarthy, into the abyss of superstition and religion. I should do a drawing for you, as I could really use the practice. However, I don't have time for that because I'm trying to get my house on the market before winter, and I'm running out of time. So every free moment has to be spent on the house and the property. So instead you can watch me paint some walls. Buyers prefer light and sunny over dark and gloomy, so most of the rooms in the house have to be painted. So let's dig into this 45-minute long video that is titled, "I'm Scared of Dying, ... I don't think the ... was necessary. The three dots usually represent an unfinished thought or a pause, so he seems to be saying, "I'm scared of dying, but the addiction to the life heroin is worth it," is maybe what he was going to say afterwards, because judging by this film, that's what he believes. The title itself isn't great, as everyone is scared of dying, and if they're not, then they probably should be. Strangely, the title card at 3 minutes 30 seconds says that the film is actually called Lifting the Veil. Not sure why he gave it two titles. He could just have put "I'm Scared of Dying" in the thumbnail like he sort of did already and leave it at that. But "I'm Scared of Dying" is a better title than "Lifting the Veil", as that doesn't tell us anything about the content of the movie. That term usually means to reveal something hidden or secret. GojiMan reveals nothing but his own ignorance in this video.
I know death anxiety firsthand, as I developed a strong uncomfortability with death following the premature deaths of my mother, father and sister, and I have been tormented by this ever since. I have therefore decided to confront my anxieties and explore the topic further and speak to a range of different people so I can become more comfortable with my own mortality, so I can hopefully move on to a new, happier chapter in my life. Thanatophobia is an extreme fear of death or the dying process. People develop thanatophobia for many different reasons, such as they have a traumatic experience related to death or dying, or they lose somebody close to them. But you don't need to go through a traumatic event to have a fear of dying. In a 2021 YouGov study, 41% of Brits said they were afraid of death.
It's interesting that he had a similar experience to me. Losing the people you're closest to can definitely raise your death anxiety. That's what I consider his so-called thanatophobia to be. I find calling death anxiety a phobia to be a stretch, as it's just part of the human experience. Fear of dying is just one of the many things that sucks about being alive. Thinking about the suffering of other humans, and especially non-humans, is also a cause for anxiety. But calling it a disease or a phobia is a mistake. No, you might as well call fear itself a medical diagnosis then, if you're going to call fear of death some kind of rare condition. The film consists of GojiMan talking about his own fear of death and then asking, quote, experts about their thoughts on death and dying. Only one of the interview subjects actually had something interesting to say, because she is around dying people for her job. This first talking head, Billy, is an artist who clearly is struggling at playing the life game.
I can't imagine hopefully living another 30 or 40 years, but I can't imagine doing it with this. So again, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. I don't want to not be frightened of death. I want to have a healthy amount of fear, but I don't want it to be the first thought every day. Not for another 40 years. I mean, if that's all I can get, then fine, I'll take it. If the deal was, you can have 40 years, but still have your fear of death. Or we can take your fear of death away for a few weeks, and then like Mephistopheles in Dr. Faustus. What would I choose? And I think I'd choose living with this as long as possible.
This is someone who says that he loves being alive, but if life is so wonderful, then why the constant chasing of euphoria, even though his addictions are actually going to negatively affect his health and shorten his life? This is why I give zero weight to what people's subjective opinions of their own life is. This guy is saying that life is great and worth living, yet it's obvious that he's not coping well and has to seek continuous pleasure. I think that you could bet money that this man won't live to see his 60th birthday. And then there's this person. There is no reason to be interviewing a priest about any subject. Even if you're doing a documentary about clergy molesting altar boys, who cares what a priest's opinion is about that? This man believes in fairy tales and is an active opponent of science. Why in the fuck is he interviewing delusional people about their credulous opinions? Then he interviews a young woman with anxiety and depression, and she talks about how she was able to cope with it after therapy.
It's just transformative. I mean, my life is completely different. I changed from someone that was constantly at the mercy of the death phobia, telling me what to do and what not to do, especially don't go on this street because you could die in a car crash, don't do this, don't do that, to a person that has accepted death and my own mortality so that it doesn't rule me anymore. So I am now in control of my actions, so I don't let it tell me what to do and what not to do. And that's been incredibly empowering.
It's just another woo-woo segment about how good life is. His next interview is the worst one with Stephen Jenkinson, a so-called culture activist, whatever the fuck that is. Believe it or not, he actually talks more woo-woo than the priest. I'll just show a couple of clips and you'll get the idea. He's someone who puts together word salads into sentences, but still doesn't actually say a fucking thing.
When this is all gone, you don't recover it by being rational. You don't recover it by being scientifically attuned. You certainly don't recover it when you have big pharma giving way to big medical technology, which is the circumstance that I worked in for years in the death trade. You don't. What you have is that instead of a user's guide to living and dying, that's gone, and it never comes back. That certainly is the affliction in North America. You know how to extrapolate that backwards in time to why the problem is recognizable on your part of the world too. Well, that's a mystery that's not easy to resolve.
Any person who wears a hat in an indoor interview, I'm going to question them right off the bat. Just saying. Especially a hat that's not even on straight.
There are ways in which the church tells us about an attitude to death, and there are ways in which the church tells us as much as we could possibly know about what happens afterwards, because no one is certain.
No one is certain, huh? Yes, anyone with a brain is certain as fuck. If you see the dead body of a human or animal once, that's all it should take. How many more times do you need to observe a flesh spot that's been permanently powered off? Why does the mainstream media even say this nonsense? Only someone with a god delusion is uncertain about what happens when you're a corpse. GojiMan letterboxed this video for some reason. To make it look more like a feature film, I guess. You know, that's really not necessary. You're just making about 20% of your image a black void for no good reason. It's like leaving money on the table. You're giving up all that real estate for style. You can tell from these shots that they were actually lensed at a 16:9 ratio, which is the standard size of a television or computer monitor. They weren't set up with that black letterboxing in mind. You can see here that GojiMan's head is cut off, and this shot just doesn't look right being cropped like this. You know, the chimney is cut off, and it really does look like a crop, not a pleasantly framed shot. You know, just my opinion on aesthetics, I don't really see the point of blackening out part of your image.
I've never spoken to anyone about my fear of death, so I've decided to reach out to fellow thanatophobes, people who have overcome their fears, spiritual leaders to see how they view death, and also people who work in palliative care, so I can try and make peace with my own fears and ultimately try and figure out how we can all become more comfortable with death.
I mean, you might as well talk to anyone on Earth. I mean, calling death anxiety thanatophobia is like calling fear of pain a phobia. Every being on Earth fears pain and death because it's biological on a genetic level. Even plants are programmed to avoid dying. This documentary just seems so silly to me because he's acting like death anxiety is some kind of diagnosis like schizophrenia. This is what being alive and aware is like. GojiMan, you are not suffering from a DSM disorder. You just realize where you are and what's in store for you. Because you can't cure life or death. There is no cure. So all you can do is accept it and accept that it didn't have to be this way. Your parents really gave you a raw deal. You were the victim of their fun times. Come on, man, this is just silly. I mean, the only cure for life is extinction.
So, an end-of-life doula, I think it can be quite hard to sum up what we do just in one sentence, because the beauty and the uniqueness of the role is because it's flexible and it changes depending on who we're supporting. But in essence, we provide emotional and practical support to people at the end of life, and spiritual support too, if that's what the person wants.
Now, this is the one interesting person he interviews because she works in a hospice with dying people all the time.
I think people can assume that the end-of-life doula role can be in some ways quite a sad and miserable role, when actually it is full of life, and I find it really uplifting, and I think that's the experience of many end-of-life doulas.
But wow, deluded much? That's actually horrifying that that's her attitude.
I believe with the church that when we die, we will be raised to a bodily resurrection. Some people will find that quite outlandish to believe because they see what happens.
So obviously this part is just a total waste. Come on, GojiMan, this person is not someone you can take seriously as an intellectual. He believes that the Lord of the Rings is real, and no scientific facts are going to inform his view. So why the fuck are you wasting hard drive space on this drivel? I mean, to me, this is like inviting Dracula to a party. Like, what the fuck are you doing? This guy's peddling brain poison and lies. This credulity should not be encouraged like what he's doing here.
If you look at what happens to us on a microscopic level, and you look at the recycling in nature of every different part of us, and in fact the recycling during the whole of our earthly life cycle of the different cells of the body, I don't have any cells in common with my 20-year-old self, then I don't think the resurrection of the body is so outlandish in that case.
So he's talking about the fact that our bone cells are replaced completely every decade or so. That has no correlation to your brain being uploaded to a different dimension where you live as a ghost hanging out with a mythical god. That's quite a stretch and a logical fallacy called false equivalence. I can't believe he kept this shit in this documentary.
We often hear in, society, people asking the question, what's the meaning of life? I'd just like to flip that question on its head with you and just explore what you think the meaning of death is.
I feel like this is what you would call a stupid question. That's like saying, what is the meaning of the universe? It just is. Life isn't permanent, it's broken from the start. Life is death, death is life. You can't have one without the other. There's no meaning, and that's the meaning. It's unnecessary and pointless.
These are very demographically, culturally, and temporally specific things you're asking me about. The meaning of death is largely determined by how you live, not by your, quote, austere and particular beliefs about dying. And I could say it differently and suggest it this way to you. We have a circumstance where most of the meaning that accrues to our lives, we imagine that we're assigning to it as kind of liberal-minded, Western types, that we are free to do so, and we do so ongoingly. In actual fact, most of the meaning of your life is a consequence of two things you don't have much voice in. One, your cultural inheritance, and two, the meaning that is attached to your life by people who are not you, by people who survive you.
Well, this is just the story that you tell yourself. The human race will go extinct, so you're not going to be remembered for very long. You're just another bug on the crust of planet Earth. I mean, this is just gobbledygook Jordan Peterson nonsense.
I like to look at it in some ways as life being a veil between us and God and eternity. So the limitations of our physicality, the limitations of time and space. And when we die, those limitations cease to hold us back. So there is a veil opened, and we are intimately aware of what eternal life is and who God is and what the life is that we were born for. That's the way I like to look at it.
So GojiMan took the title of his film from this baby talk. There is no veil. Once you're dead, and it's game over, end of story. What's the fucking mystery? You might as well ask a child what death means to them, if they can't understand that simple fact.
Helping people understand the narrative of a dying process can be reassuring for people, and that it's really normal, especially with things like the death rattle, for people to make noises as they're dying. But actually, these tend to be because the person is so deeply unconscious and relaxed that they're not aware of what are usually natural reflexes that we have. For example, the urge to clear our throats if something's tickling. So what we can say to people and the people witnessing is that actually, whilst it can obviously be distressing to listen to, we can take that as a sign that the person is actually deeply relaxed. And some of that can take away a lot of the fear around the dying process.
So this is more bullshit. I feel like maybe she hasn't really watched that many people die yet. Many people die writhing in agony while they shit themselves. She's trying to make dying seem less scary, but she's really not being honest here. I think she is describing hospice, where the patient is given constant morphine so that makes them fall asleep, and it looks more peaceful.
And then take them through and bless them before and after death, and then carry out the funeral and the burial or the cremation. Accompanying people through that is an immense privilege. It is a very awesome time, and it gets you here, but it also gets me here and tells me here that there is something really quite special going on beyond our understanding.
Awesome. It's not creepy at all. Nope. Not creepy in the slightest.
You've obviously witnessed death. You've got a lot of experience with death. You're very well versed and read around sort of the topic. From all of these different sort of experiences, what do you believe happens after we go? The $1 million question, what do you think comes next?
Well, I mean, you have to engage, you have to respond in possibilities at best. That's all you've got, right? From this side of the rend in the fabric.
Facepalm. What happens after you die is the $1 million question? Oh, GojiMan. Imagine going into the computer repair shop and asking, hey, I dropped my smartphone in the lake, and now I want to know, where did its soul go? They'll look at you like you're fucking crazy, and rightfully so. I'd like to hear GojiMan's theory about how neural connections escape from the body to an alternate dimension and into another body where they live on forever. I'm kind of shocked that I have to explain death to someone with a science-based channel. I mean, does he really not know what happens after death, even though he witnessed 3 of his family members die? I don't know why he would entertain ideas and concepts that have no basis in fact and are actually invisible, like a brain's consciousness being uploaded to another dimension. We've known since the first Homo sapiens died what happens. About 4 minutes after vital functions stop, decomposition begins. Livor mortis turns the skin gray as blood starts to settle at the body's lowest points. The dead person's body takes on the temperature of the ambient environment. It drops around 2 degrees Fahrenheit per hour. Then, in the hours that follow, post-mortem rigidity or rigor mortis begins, about 2 to 3 hours after death. It first affects the muscles in the face and neck and then works its way down the body. After about 12 hours, a body is usually completely stiff, and thus the term stiff to describe a corpse. Rigor mortis lasts for around 3 days. After that, the very cells in the human body start to disintegrate. Enzymes cannibalize the cells, proteins, lipids, and DNA. The breakdown of the cells allows microorganisms to access them and feed. So, 4 to 8 hours after death, a body will start to rapidly decompose and smell bad as billions of bacteria generate gases such as hydrogen sulfide. But rather than let his audience in on the science of death, he prefers to go backwards 2,000 years before there was science.
If you're anything like me, you will often wonder why we're here and what's the meaning of life and death. The problem with these types of questions is that while they are super important, they are unfathomable. They are sprawling philosophical questions that are not manageable to us.
What? What the fuck? Is he on drugs now? That's what it seems like. There is no mystery here. It's not rocket science. Well, this video was very bad, very pretentious and stupid. He's very much implying here that there is a God, and that is just detestable. I hate seeing a science channel turn into philosophical diarrhea like this, but I think that all antinatalists just expect this now. It's just more pro-life propaganda, which comes at us in many different forms every single day. But a vegan really should know better. This is based on what evidence? Do you cry over the non-existent Martians or Plutonians? No, of course not, because that would be dumb. I guess GojiMan thinks that he's something more than a chemical robot. He thinks that there is actually a self. The self is just an illusion. It's a story playing inside your head. You're just a brain that's creating an experience for itself. There really is no you. Once the electricity in your brain is turned off, the illusion is turned off permanently. Once autolysis or cell cannibalization begins, this is the swan song of your brain, which contains what you would call your personality. Every memory you ever had is now gone forever.
Being an end-of-life doula has changed my perception of death and life massively. I think it's mainly really helped me to focus on what truly matters to me and not spend time doing things that I don't want to do or that don't have meaning to me.
You know, that is actually true. I feel the same way. With every death of someone I know, my perception changes slightly. I feel more urgency for sure. But like she says, she's young and she talks about her grandmother dying. My grandparents died when I was still a kid, so I feel like she hasn't known that many people close to her who have died, like a spouse or a sibling. Hospice is not the subject here. Hospice has a lot of problems that they don't even go into. Why not give someone a lethal dose of morphine if there is no coming back? Why force them to suffer? It makes no fucking sense.
There is significance to everyone's life, and that the world would be a poorer place without us. And I believe that while we may not understand now, everything that happens in your life happens for a reason. Albert Camus sums all of this up perfectly. You will never be happy if you continue to search for what happiness consists of, and you will never live if you are looking for the meaning of life.
And then to put the cherry on top, he quotes nihilist Albert Camus, who happens to have died horrifically in a car crash when he was exactly my age. In the end, this film is very disappointing because he's really missing the point. This is a film about selfish personal fear. In the long term, your own fear is really insubstantial compared to the suffering of the future. We know of one guaranteed way of not imposing this on someone else, and it's called responsibly refraining from breeding more human slaves. Basically, what GojiMan has created is a piece of pro-life propaganda. The point of this movie should have been a legal right to die for everyone. That's the only issue here that needs to be discussed regarding death and people who already exist. The second issue is that you don't make more victims of death and dying. It's only logical to recommend that, but GojiMan isn't going to go there. He'd prefer to live in a fantasy where suffering has some kind of meaning. He really needs to be smarter than this. I mean, religion? Really? It is sad when an established YouTuber finally makes a philosophy video and it's this bad. So anti-science, so anti-logic, so anti-reason. He seems to have no idea about evolution or what a pointless competition it is. And this is the kind of video that makes me unsubscribe after watching. It's a jump the shark episode. It's a point of no return where a show loses all of its credibility. I covered vegan YouTuber Corey McCarthy's jump the shark moment when he converted to Catholicism. Now GojiMan, like other people in the vegan YouTube community, such as Dr. Avi, now is firmly on the side of religion. This is really an attack on rationality and logic itself. We really don't have time for these stupid games. He didn't even talk about the right to die at all. Didn't even mention the prohibition against suicide, and then he quotes one of the most well-known proponents of pointless suffering. Does he know that killing people on purpose out of mercy is illegal? Even if you want a doctor to relieve your pain or your loved one's agony, they will deny you a graceful and painless farewell. If you're going to make a video about death, then that is the real issue. If you can't stand the death anxiety anymore, you should be able to take a pill and go to sleep. And die on your own terms. You didn't ask to be here and shouldn't be forced to stay if you don't want to. GojiMan wants you to buy his expensive products and buy his religious pro-life credulity. 78,000 subscribers are exposed to the woo-woo mysticism, and that's really bad for your brain health. The point is that you're fucked. Your parents flipped the hourglass over for you, and now you're the one who has to watch it go down till the end. You have no choice but to accept annihilation. Look at it this way, your videos may outlive you and have an impact beyond your lifetime, so I agree with the death doula that you should in some respect live like there's no tomorrow, because there may not be one for you. So to minimize your death anxiety, you might want to get started on that bucket list right now. Just make sure that procreating is not on that list. Even though you're fucked like the rest of us, you don't want to fuck over a brand new person. The pop psychologist Tony Robbins has said, "Anxiety is me being worried about me." Try not to think only about yourself so much. You are going to die and there's nothing you can do about it, but worrying about it doesn't help you or anyone else. The best thing that you can do is be an advocate for a legal right to die for everyone and promote antinatalism. No new victims should have to go through this. Death and dying are just two of the reasons why I am an antinatalist. Forcing disease and death on someone else without mercy, without compassion, without any decency, under other circumstances would be considered to be cruel torture and murder. But because creating life is mistakenly seen as a reason to celebrate in our culture, GojiMan can't make the connection between natalism and carnism. He's not smart enough apparently, and doesn't think enough about the game that he's been dropped into. If you shouldn't torture and kill an innocent animal for momentary taste pleasure, then you shouldn't torture and kill a human being by creating them. Parents do not even seem to consider that their creation is going to die someday. Imposing a death sentence on someone and forcing them to count down the years, the months, the weeks, the hours, minutes, and seconds until it comes is psychological torture. He sort of gets that, but doesn't get that it was completely unnecessary and cruel. Pretending that everything is fine and that you just need mysticism or psychotherapy to cure it is not going to solve the problem. Imminent doom is breathing down our necks constantly until it finally wins. Not to have anxiety about that would be crazy and a mental illness. So I don't really know what the point of this video was. He identified a problem but offered no solutions. He didn't even understand what the real problem is. So I hope that GojiMan is able to pull his head out of his ass and get away from irrational fantasies and get back to scientifically proven facts. There's enough credulity and faith to fight in the world, and we don't need more of that bullshit coming from vegan activists who should know better. Thanks for watching.